I'm now going to attempt to lull you to sleep with some economics of the ocean. Why am I doing this? I guess I should say at the outset. I think it's important when you're an actor in the ocean environment to understand where people spend their time, and a good proxy for that is where does the money in the ocean go? And so really what I'm going to give you, I hope, today is a bit of an insight into where people spend their economic activity. Where is the money in the ocean? Not necessarily because we want to engage that in an economic way, but it's an indication of where you want to spend your time if you want to engage on ocean issues. A little bit, first of all, about my organization. So the Institute for Ocean Research Enterprise is hosted here in the Steele Ocean Sciences building at Dalhousie University. Our mantra is science-informed, sustainable economic ocean development. Sustainable in all definitions of the word: economically sustainable, ecologically sustainable, socially sustainable. And we do that through three activities: connecting people, providing advocacy, and developing infrastructure where it's appropriate. So we will, for instance, facilitate the deployment of a buoy system if there's no other way to get it done. On the connecting side, I would say our example of that, and there's several people in the room that have presented, is our Ocean Connector event. They run monthly. We've had now over 30 of them in the last 3 years, and by head count, I think we've had over 2,000 people attend them. So it's a really good opportunity to engage a broad spectrum of the ocean community here in Nova Scotia. A little bit about the ocean industry. First of all, they are growing. The resource extraction industry is growing, fisheries and agriculture is growing, marine transportation is growing. You can see all these factoids on the various sectors of the ocean that you're probably all very familiar with. Security and defense continues to be an issue in the ocean. So all to say that the humans' use of the ocean is not decreasing, it's increasing. And so we need to deal with the fact that there's a larger use of the ocean itself is changing, and so we have to be acutely aware of the interaction between ourselves as land-based mammals and the system that is the ocean. I want to go through a couple of numbers and just sizes to give you a feel for where the ocean activity in the ocean is. The global Navy and Coast Guard activity, the defense and security aspects of the ocean, is a very, very large part of the ocean economy. And it's not all necessarily bad. There are some really profound investments by organizations like the U.S. Navy, the Office of Naval Research, in things like the UNOS fleet, which enables civilian science and stewardship of the ocean. So I would argue that here in Canada in the Navy and in other navies in the world, the Navy, the sailors of the Navy are also stewards of the ocean. They live and they earn their income and they derive their activity from the ocean. So a really good partner in so many ways around ocean activities. I won't stop on a lot of these, just dwell on one at a time. But the global fishing industry, has been mentioned before, is huge. A billion people depend solely on seafood for their protein. 2.6 billion people depend on seafood as at least 20% of their protein, and that's continuing to increase. People that study the energy systems of food, and there's some of them in the room, have much more profound things than I to say, but it's a very efficient way to feed the population of the world. So we need to recognize that. We need to also recognize that I believe we're in a bit of a transition from capture fishery to aquaculture. You could argue how good a practice aquaculture currently is, but I think from a macroeconomic point of view, that trend line is self-evident, it's continuing, and we need to come to terms with aquaculture in terms of how we deal with that on a global scale. We'll surpass capture fishery by 2020. 10.7 million people are employed globally, with 10.1 million of those in Asia, and most of that 10.1 million is in China. So we are the round-off era in aquaculture here in the West. The vast majority of the employment in the sector, the harvested catch in the sector, is in fact in China. It's not a new industry in China, it is a new industry here in the West. On the Canadian side, just to put it in perspective, there are something on the order of 83,000 people employed in the fishing industry, in aquaculture, commercial fisheries, and the fish processing industry. That is stagnant. It's not increasing. In particular, the fish processing employment has gone down over the last number of years. So it's not a growth industry currently in Canada. Aquaculture is trending up, but it varies very much by province. So in Nova Scotia, it's not particularly a growth industry right now. But in total, it's worth something on the order of almost $5 billion to the Canadian economy. The offshore oil and gas industry, it is still a very large sector. We certainly are seeing a suppressed activity in that sector because of the current price of oil. I point you at the last set of bullets, these things called sanction prices, which is a term that I only came to terms with several years ago. Basically, those are the cutoff points below which the price of oil doesn't justify the activity. So in shallow water activity, you can continue to extract oil in shallow water, as in some parts of the Gulf of Mexico, at a price as low as $20 to $30 per barrel. Deep water, 500 to 1,500 meters, 20 to 60. Ultra deep, which is the kind of water we're dealing with off the southwest Nova Shore, you need to have prices in the range of $36 to $80 a barrel, depending on the location. We are sitting currently at around $50 a barrel, so I would say that ultra deep in the southwest Nova is, to some extent, going to continue. I don't think there's an indication that those fields are going to be abandoned. Witness Shell's continue to commitment to that activity. Global marine transportation, 90% of the world trade travels by ship. The interesting truth on that is that 90% of the world's trade probably also travels by truck, so those aren't additive statistics. But the vast majority of the manufactured products coming from factories in Asia, in particular to the west, are spending the bulk of their time on ship. And 25% of that, in addition to the sort of manufactured goods, is actually the movement of petroleum on the ocean. $500 billion of annual freight revenue to the commercial fishery, commercial shipping of the world, and 50,000 merchant ships in the world, broken down as you see them there. Interestingly, it's a really cost-effective and reasonably environmentally sound way to ship large volumes of products. So shipping a 120-foot container costs about the same as you getting on that airplane and traveling the same route from Asia to North America, for instance. So extremely cost-effective if you load that container up with a lot of high-value electronics, for instance. About 1 million people earn their living from commercial transportation on the sea. And relatively speaking, on a per ton, per kilometer basis, the large-scale shipping of goods is a relatively green industry. It certainly needs to work more on it, but in terms of its emissions and its footprint in terms of as a vector of invasive species, but comparing it to certainly land-based transportation and air transportation of goods, it's reasonably good. 96 major ports in Canada, 19 now run by port authorities, which have been these autonomized organizations. They were originally all run by the federal government. They're now run by independent boards. Halifax is one of the larger ones of those. Total shipping revenue of $2.8 billion, and then this trickle-down effect of the surrounding community. So, for instance, I think the total revenue to the Port of Halifax as an organization, the Port of Halifax Authority, is only about $35 million. The impact on the local economy, the regional economy, would be 100-fold that. So they are significant drivers of economies in so many very positive ways. Marine tourism, marine and coastal tourism. This is the sleeping giant in my mind. The largest sector by employment in the world of any sector is tourism. The highest growth sector is adventure and marine tourism. So there's something we need to look at there, I think, as Nova Scotians, as Atlantic Canadians, as Canadians at large. It's not well studied. I think the opportunity for analytics in that sector are profound. The opportunities for ecotourism, science-based tourism, cultural-based tourism, I think are underestimated completely, and people like Nick are able to point out the value of the resource that we have there and how we might better maintain it, sustain it, and exploit it from a commercial point of view. On the Canadian side, about $3 billion worth of marine tourism. These are the numbers they break it into, so not to say this is the only metric of marine tourism. I would argue, for instance, that it's much broader than that. So the burgeoning wine industry in Nova Scotia, some would argue, because of the terroir, which is in fact an ocean terroir. So it extends across the whole region and the whole economy in many, many ways. But by direct measure, it's a huge employer of people, and it's a large driver of the local economy. Ocean research. We live in I work at a university that's a very significant ocean research university. This city is very much a global player in ocean research between the university and the various industry research activities, and the three big federal labs, the BIO campus, the Defense Lab, and the National Research Council's labs. If you add all that up, even within the city, there's arguably close to 500 PhDs in ocean-related fields, so it's a powerhouse in terms of research. Put that in global perspective, there's around 1,200 research vessels registered per IMO definition of a research vessel. Interesting to see where that R&D activity takes place. If you break that down, $2.5 billion worth of shipbuilding-related R&D, oil and gas R&D, $3.5 billion, other marine industry, $1.5 billion, civilian government R&D, that would be what goes on at Bedford Institute and National Research Council, for instance, globally is about $7 billion. Naval R&D, which is actually in the term, the full term is R&D, T&E, test and evaluation included, is something on the order of $36 billion. Interesting number. Again, that is not all offensive warfare weapons development. The vast majority of it is pure ocean research and is in fact a good source of funding for some of the activities that you folks are interested in. Don't consider those all necessarily the enemy as it comes to this dialogue. Total global marine R&D is about $50.9 billion. That's very small compared to the numbers you were seeing on the previous slides. All to say that if you want to get the attention of the larger public and engage on these sorts of issues, we need to think about the bigger ocean economy, not just our iconoclastic little ivory towers of research institutions. It's very important to think that way, I think. So if you add all that up, about 5% of the global GDP, which is the measure of the economy of the world, about 5% of the world's economy is oceans derived, based on a study done in the UK in 2013. In Canada, it's only 2%. So while we might sit here in Canada's Ocean City or on the west coast of Vancouver and have this distorted view that says Canada is an ocean nation, in fact, by population density and distribution and by economy, it's not. And that's simply because our big cities, Toronto and Montreal, are not ocean cities. And so it does challenge us in terms of how we engage the Canadian public at large. Our ocean economy is undersized compared to its peers, so that 5% will be the number in the US. In China, it's more than 8%. In most of the Western European countries, it fluctuates around that 8% number. So we are, by pure comparison, not an ocean country. We need to recognize that and figure out ways to engage the Canadian public. This is an opportunity for growth, particularly in Atlantic Canada. As someone pointed out, it might have been Nick, by comparison, Nova Scotia's GDP is on the order of 15% of our GDP. So we are an ocean venue here in Nova Scotia, as is true of most of Atlantic Canada. So if we can get more engagement on our ocean economy, it goes a long ways towards solving the Ivany challenge of how do we renovate and reinvigorate our economy here in Nova Scotia. The answer truly is oceans. There's no question about that. The last one, the Big Ocean Small Economy Challenge, I deal with a lot of folks in the science world, and at some point they'll put up a map of North America and say, look at all these sensors of the ocean on the US side of the border, and look at how sparse it gets once you cross into the Canadian side of the border. If you normalize that by population or economy size, it actually gets denser. On a per capita, per dollar GDP basis, we probably outspend the US in ocean research. The problem is that we have a huge ocean and a small economy and a small population. So the opportunity from an engineer's point of view is for innovation, is for really advanced technology, ways of using robots, ways of using remote sensing, ways of using citizen science and vessels of opportunity to get maximum bang for the buck in terms of the way we observe and interact with our ocean. I'll leave it at that. I know we're almost done. Just a bit of a toss-up to some of the companies. We have a plethora of companies, and Nick has pointed this out earlier, in this region. It is really a rich environment. I've spent 35 years of my life in this industry. Anywhere I travel, and if I say I'm from Halifax, they know where that is in this sector for a whole variety of reasons. So we live in the center of a whole good area for that. I'm not going to dwell on that, but I do want to dwell on that just to finish up because Nick did a good segue to it. This is, I said this, I emceed the Ocean Gala Dinner last night, and then 2 years ago. 2 years ago I said this is the most profound, exciting thing I've seen in my 35-year career. It's an opportunity to bring together the power of the ocean research in this area, the power of the ocean industry in this area, and the fact that culturally we're an ocean people, and create a very iconic statement around that. And this whole center is going to be a redevelopment of the old Coast Guard base. If you're from here on the Dartmouth shore, it's got the best view of Halifax you can ever imagine. As a very operational center for ocean commerce, ocean research, ocean engagement with the public, it will be all of that all combined. The hope is to have that opened and ready about this time next year, so middle of 2017. Stay tuned for a lot more information, a lot more publicity about this over the next several weeks to several months. And I'll stop there.